X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom. This is our weekly X-Men podcast where we normally rank every story from A to Z, but instead we're doing something different this week. Adam couldn't make it, so we're missing a bit of our A, but instead we've brought in somebody that I'm very excited to talk to. I'm Zack, by the way. You guys already knew that, right? You may know him from his work on, currently X-Men Unlimited, featuring our boy Maggott. But also previously books like Friendo, Arcadia, the Lords of Empire tie-in, Hulk, Time of Monsters, and some work over at DC coming up really soon, like DC versus Vampires All Out War. It is Alex Paknadel. Alex, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, sorry, it's knocking on a bit here, but yeah, lovely to be on. Thanks for having me.
It's exciting. I'll tell you. I've been a fan of your work since I started, being aware of it. Uh, I know you are part of the White Noise Collective. A couple of writers who are doing some really exciting things over in comics. And when this popped up with you writing a character that I have long considered one of my favorite obscure, dudes. I was pretty pumped about that. So tell for folks who may not know you, since X-Men fans tend to be, how do you say, insular in their reading. Uh, what's your background? How'd you end up in this position here?
Oh, you want me to Copperfield it or just the comics bit?
Whatever bit you think is going to be relevant to this conversation about a man with slug bellies.
Okay. Yeah. So I've been working in comics since 2015, I guess. Just sort of trying to making sort of lateral moves, sort of in and out of indie comics. Recently, been getting some big two work, which is great. Hopefully, no. In fact, there is more on the horizon, which is exciting. Um, Lauren Amaro, who I worked with on the Lords of Empire tie-ins. She reached out to me a few months ago, and I think she just made a move over to the X office and asked me if I wanted to do some unlimited stuff. And I mean, honestly, I mean, if this isn't too cringe, X-Men's always been kind of the brass ring for me. That's where I started reading comics. My dad kind of blooded me into comics with like Claremont Cockrum and Claremont Byrne X-Men. That's what, when I was in hospital as a kid and, I wasn't allowed to read comics, that was the run that he brought into me. So there's the obligatory sob story, but genuinely, like X-Men is my kind of first and last love. So when Lauren said, do you want to do a run on, do you want to do a short X-Men run? Yeah, I lost my skittles. It's fair to say.
So browbeating your children into reading Claremont is an effective strategy. That's what I'm hearing.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Good. Because I'm
True
trying.
story. My dad picked up. He managed to. A friend of his was working in London. Sorry, this is terribly tortuous, but this is absolutely true. My dad's friend was working in London, Britain's first specialty comic store, which was called Dark They Were and Golden Eye, and they managed to get copies of Giant Size X-Men 1 in, and very few made it to the UK. There was a printing snafu, and very few made it. But my dad managed to get one. I think he bought it for like the princely sum of like £5. So that was like an incredible amount of money. And on his way home, he was hit by a car on his bicycle, and he twisted in midair This is absolutely true. He twisted in midair so that his body would absorb the brunt of the impact rather than the comic, which,
So he understood what he was supposed to do there. We have to
I think
sacrifice
so,
for
yeah.
the art.
Like but it's also like, I mean, it's insane, right? I mean, like, I love
Oh,
comics,
absolutely.
but that's I love that particular comic, but like, I mean, I'm sorry, but it's absorbing it's if it's between the comic and me, like, it's the comic.
No, I think that is absolutely fair. Uh, so you've had a background, enjoying this. You've obviously had a handful of books that have come out that have been very well acclaimed. I know specifically when I was at the last Comic Con that happened before Comic Cons happened again, C2E2 back in 2020, I guess it was right before the pandemic. There
Yeah.
was a panel that announced you were going to be doing those Lords of Empire tie-ins, and one of my good buddies who I was there with, Chris Edelman, uh,
Yeah.
heard your name, and the audience, and I think it was Brevoort said, Alex Paknadel, you may know him. Who here's Red Friendo, and he was insanely excited to hear that you were going to be jumping on and doing some work there.
Yeah, no, I heard that. I think my buddy Al Ewing, I think, was on that panel.
Al was on that panel, yes.
Yeah, and like, honestly, I think, like, there was a bit of incredulity initially, because I was writing I was writing a couple of, like, peripheral tie-ins, and it was good because the great thing about tie-ins is that you get to kind of laser focus on something that gets kind of glossed over or can be glossed over, sort of, in the sort of wider conflict.
Hmm.
And, like, in a lot of respects, you're, like, a lot freer than you are anywhere else. Like, I genuinely, like, if anyone ever offers me an event tie-in, I'll just grab it with both hands. Yes, I turn into Meg Ryan in When Harry Met Sally. Like, I absolutely love them. Just a done-in-one story with consequences, where you don't have to put the furniture back the way you found it. Like, in
Hmm.
event tie-ins, stuff can change. They're great. They're just great.
That's exciting. Now you're going from that, and those stories, which were a few years back now. I mean, it was around Swordsman and Sequoia, who are not, I would say, the top tier Marvel characters, just in
No.
terms of their IP. Like you can mess with them, it's fine.
Yeah.
And in this story that you're doing right now for X-Men Unlimited, you are featuring Maggott.
Hmm.
Maggott, a character who has,
The most interesting X-Man. Yes.
I wasn't gonna say it,
Yeah, it's true.
but
Yeah. 100%.
he, listen, Alex, you're talking to a guy who has one, two, 3 to 4 framed pieces of art of Maggott sitting in his office right now. So
There you
I can appreciate
go.
what you're doing with this gentleman. I am not one of the, how do you say, like, this is not a Let's Talk Maggott account for people who were on Twitter for about 3 years ago. No, this is just a character that I have had a lot of affection for. Reading some of the stuff back in the '90s, and then
Hmm.
you know always loving those weird characters. But this is a character that I would say has a lot of flexibility. He's still not as fleshed out as some of the other more prestigious members of the X-Men. So what drew you to Maggott and making him the center point of this story that you're telling?
I mean, honestly, Lauren said, who you're interested in, and the list I gave Lauren, I'll tell you. The list I gave Lauren. Oh no, there were a few others, but the main ones I've always wanted to get my hands on, because I think they're most interesting, conceptually, not necessarily as characters, but conceptually.
Mhm.
Cypher, I think Cypher's absolutely fascinating. Um, Madrox, there's so much to be done with Madrox, which is not to say that people aren't doing admirable and wonderful things with Madrox, because they are, but, like, there's, yeah, I have a pitch in my back pocket for Madrox that, like, I would love to do someday. And I think, again, fascinating. And the other was Maggott. Um, and I think, the attraction is for me on a character level is the kind of the iceberg of him. The fact that um, you have this sort of gossamer thin bravado, but underneath there are sort of still waters that run very, very deep. This is someone who is intensely vulnerable, um, and but who affects this kind of persona. Um, and it's never particularly convincing, but it is, however, I think anyway, just incredibly endearing. And there's also, it's not, I don't think it's I don't think it's like a sort of hollow, I don't think there isn't a hollowness to that performance. I think there's
Hmm.
also a genuine, um just how can I'm trying to sort of find the right words. I apologize, it's quite late here, sorry, but yeah,
Oh, you're
just
fine.
I I love the fact that there's a sort of that there's just this innocence to him that I've always responded to ever since the character kind of first appeared. Um, and weirdly, when there was that sort of, he sort of fell out of favor for a while, didn't he? Which I never understood because I always thought, I mean, it was just, I remember like even, but back in the 90s, the introduction of the character, I mean, just what a fascinating concept. And what I think like predates someone like Phantom X, who's
Oh
broadly
yeah.
quite, Phantom X broadly, in terms of the sort of the power set, quite similar. And but Phantom X is this sort of Morrisonian high watermark, whereas Maggott for a while kind of faded into the background unfairly, in my view. So yeah, I mean,
No, absolutely. It's a character that would routinely make listicles of here's the worst Marvel characters ever, which I always found unfair because I've read the dang stories and he's good. He rules.
100%. And also, I mean, he is he's a walking telepathic hive mind. I mean, my God, I
Hmm.
mean, it's just fascinating all the way down. There's so much. I mean, and by the way, like, I'm not about to come out and say, I've done it, lads, because, my hope obviously is that, better and younger and fresher writers will kind of, hopefully now that, I mean, other people have sort of tried to, have sort of positioned him, and put him sort of back in the spotlight, way before me. But anything I can do to sort of aid the cause is all to the good as far as I'm concerned.
No, listen. The Maggott contingent is very very happy about that work. Now, I want to jump into the work specifically that you're doing because I think this is the kind of story that I don't think people expected to be told on this app in Marvel Unlimited. I think one of the benefits of what the Lauren and the X-Men team are doing with these Marvel Unlimited comics, and specifically X-Men Unlimited, is saying, "Hey, no, we're making stories that matter, that are
Mm.
going to ask and answer questions that people have had with the story engine that is Krakoa."
Yeah.
So let me ask from your perspective here. You jump in with a story of, hey, since like House of X, there has been a note about, hey, we don't resurrect two of the same people at the same time. That's going to be bad vibes for everybody.
Mm.
What was it about that question that made you jump in and say, yes, I want to answer it. I want this to be what I dig into.
Um, like honestly, and hand to God, that question, I I won't say I arrived at independently, but it certainly wasn't. It wasn't sort of back of mind when I came up with the
Hmm.
concept. Right? Um, it was one of those. I mean, but I'm sure it was kind of percolating away somewhere. But it wasn't. It wasn't something that I was kind of consciously keying into. I genuinely just thought, well, here's this. Here are the resurrection protocols. Um, Here's a really interesting mechanism. Because and also I thought it was something that. as it inevitably must, when it happens to a kind of what we may for convenience term a marquee character, that's obviously going to be a very kind of pivotal storyline.
Right.
But if it's a failure of bureaucracy, right? If it's an administrative oversight, then you can kind of go low key with it in a way that also presents a kind of an on ramp, right? And that's kind of the way I view that. That's the way I saw. I mean, to the extent that we did have to coordinate with the whole X office. I mean, my understanding is that
Hmm.
the writers in the room all had eyes on it because uh, I mean, I don't think this is too inside baseball. There were certain areas that I wanted to explore and that I couldn't because it's still they're waiting for that kind of gunpowder to get really dry before they ignite it.
Right.
Um, but for all that, by the way, that I mean, I had a tremendous amount of latitude. I mean, I was amazed what I got away with. I mean, particularly the tenor of the thing, because I'm not the. I don't think if anyone has read my work. I mean, I don't have the sunniest disposition. And I said, well, I want to do something that's hopefully a bit of a tearjerker. And
Hmm.
they signed off on it and they were into it, and so I got to run with it. But yeah, I mean, in terms of sort of coordinating across the offices and everything, I mean, the transparency was great, the feedback was great, and honestly, I mean, I'm over egging the pudding, but there were a couple of areas, but like in the main, I got this bewildering and unexpected sort of procession of yeses that I like never expected to get. If nothing else, just being able to do the story like in that format. Just, oh yeah, do you mind if I
Hmm.
do this in unlimited? Yeah, sure. No problem. They dug it.
Now, I know Marvel's been experimenting with the Infinite Scroll kind of format for their unlimited comics. Uh, you know, did you have to adjust anything about your scripting style uh, to be jumping into a comic in that format?
Yeah, I mean, and I was very, they were very, Lauren was very generous. She sent me some of Hickman's scripts for the first arc. Sorry, I'm going to cough. I do apologize. Yeah, I was sent Hickman's scripts for the first one that he did with Declan Shalvey.
Hmm.
So I kind of got a sense of how they're composed, and to be honest, I mean, in terms of the sort of brute mechanics of the thing, it's just there are no page breaks, right? So you go from instead of going 4 or 5 panels per page, the whole script is 30 panels, 35 panels. Um,
Hmm.
what was interesting to me, and like I spoke to Kieran Gillen about this before I did it, because um, if you want technical and storytelling advice, you go to Kieran Gillen. And he just said, "Look, just have fun with the format. There's a lot of scope for that. Just try and visualize the scroll and do every basically every interesting trick in the book that you can think of. Just give it a go. This is the place to do it."
Hmm.
And there's a bit of that. There was people throwing things from one panel into another panel, and um, I think there was one I was quite proud of, which is where you had the sort of the husk of Enid's sort of immature form, and it goes from an environment panel into negative space, and then back into an environment panel with various kind of characters
Hmm.
situated around it, stuff like that. But I mean, I have to say, I mean, what worked because of Julian, not because of me. Julian absolutely took those ideas, ran with them, made them work. It was an absolutely joyous collaboration, and I have this. I have a strong suspicion that I've borrowed him from greatness.
I would not say that a comic about Maggott and his very angry slugs who are trying to just get through things right now would be barring anyone from greatness. I think that's greatness in and of itself.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
you are talking about Julian Shaw, who is the artist bringing this story to life.
yeah,
Who's making it a comic, really?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, it was just when you're really kind of when a collaboration's working, every time you open an attachment, with the latest kind of thumbnails or whatever, it feels like Christmas, and it
Hmm.
felt like Christmas every single time.
No, that is good to hear. I know it's always interesting some of the arranged marriages that you get with the big two work that
Mm,
puts you together. And it's good to hear that this one worked out very well. And I think it came across in the work. There's a lot of dynamicism to this. There was a lot of great character acting and emotion in this. And I think that's important for this story, which is for people who don't know, a story about Maggott trying to one deal with his place in Krakoa, being a hated character, quote unquote, uh, and being a guy who now also has to deal with resurrection, and that maybe one of his slugs got accidentally resurrected, even if it wasn't dead. Now, I think that part is interesting because you don't just have Maggott there; you have two characters who play the role of the angel and the devil around him. You got Emma Frost, who is in a very antagonistic role, but
mm,
one that's more. It's not a evil role. This is not returning her to being a crazy villain. This is her looking at a situation and saying, "Well, this just won't do. It's a bug. We will squish it, and then we will resolve this very pragmatically."
yeah,
Versus a character like Wolverine, who is a clone and is saying, "Hold on,
yep,
why do you think
yep.
this is not a real person?" What drove you to those characters being the two kind of counterpoints surrounding Maggott in this story?
I mean, okay. In turn, um, honestly, Emma Frost. Um, the reasons were twofold, right? So first of all, that kind of the sort of aristocratic Bostonian comportment that she has, I thought would play very, very well in a kind of how can I put it, like aggressively stentorian, like school marmish way. Um,
Hmm.
someone who is going to um, see a very kind of uncompromising and unequivocal there is a solution to this that requires yeah, okay, a little bit of very pragmatic brutality, and if we see it through, all the bad things go away. And there are only a couple people on Krakoa, I think, who have that very gimlet-eyed utilitarian view of things,
Right.
without being sadists, frankly, right? Um, and I think Emma Frost is one of them. This is a character who's long rehabilitated, but will still aggressively pursue the shortest distance between 2 points. You know, and if you have to cut a few ethical corners along the way, so be it. That's the appeal of the character, right? And the second reason I wanted to use her, frankly, and it's honestly just because I. And look, readers will be the judge, but like I just had a tremendous amount of fun with her dialogue. I just imagined her being the most um, aloof, haughtily sardonic character it's possible to have. So she's everything's in reference to sort of designer furniture and fine dining and just but just withering, constantly withering, and I was just having a lot of fun with that.
Hmm.
And you have to entertain yourself first and foremost. So yeah, I mean, I just honestly, like, there were points I thought, okay, I'm basically writing her as a really basically like a really really cruel kind of restaurant critic. Was kind of how I was trying to write Emma Frost. And the choice to use Wolverine, I thought was much more organic. I mean, because I think they're characters that Maggott and Laura are characters that rhyme in a very kind of multifaceted ways, right? Like it's not just on one level. They're very interesting characters in their own right. But I was just thinking about it. Okay, well, who's going to be a good, not just who's going to be a good foil for Maggott, but who will he in
Right.
turn be a good foil for? And I was thinking, and it suddenly struck me. Wolverine, and there are so many kind of points where they intersect. As you say, there's the um, uh, when the Eni issue actually arises, Laura's going to have a lot invested in that personally, as someone who is in some quarters considered, an aberration, I guess.
Hmm.
And is going to have an immediate emotional investment in the sort of well-being of Eni. But in terms of her relationship actually with Japheth, and this was the thing that first struck me, yeah, and I tried to sort of relay that in the very first part, where in the first chapter, Maggott's been benched because they want him there effectively to clean up a spill, right? Um,
Right.
because there's a character called DK who everything he touches he's basically a toxic sludge monster, and they invite Maggott because Eni and Meanie famously can eat absolutely anything, including like toxic waste. So basically, he's going to kind of decontaminate the site. And he's, but I mean, and I hope I set this up well. Laura's trying to tell him the whole time, like, look, like I'm a Wolverine, like that's what we do. We do the job
Hmm.
nobody else wants to do. Um, famously, I'm the best there is at what I do, but what I do isn't very nice.
Hmm.
And all Wolverines, that they occupy that role on the team. It's the thing that everyone turns their backs, and like Laura or Logan will take care of it. And I thought, well, yeah, that's pretty much that's the role that Maggott has been assigned for the longest time. And so, I thought there's no good reason on earth why they wouldn't be. I mean, I know it hasn't been sort of foregrounded before, but I thought, like, the hell with it. Like, yeah, they're best buds. They get on really, really well. And I tried to give that relationship as much depth as I possibly could in the space that was allotted to me. I wanted to make that friendship feel genuine and deep and textured and organic.
At least for me, it's come through
Thank you.
pretty strongly in that it was not a pairing I anticipated ever seeing, and I think part of that's just because they come from different cohorts. Let's
Mm,
say in the comics, they are in different groups, and one of them went from a character that was coming in from TV, and then boom, big star is Wolverine on the flagship X-Men team. Is the big character, and the other one is a has been forgotten guy from the 90s. You
mm.
don't see that. I think the story engine of Krakoa and what they've done with the resurrection, what they've done with saying, "Hey, everybody's here," allows that to happen.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I think about a lot when I think about this era of comics is collaboration. You mentioned, they are a tightly knit group in the walls of the X office, but you're no stranger to working collaboratively with folks. You're part of White Noise, which is a group. Yourself, Dan Waters, and Ron V, who are, I would say, fairly talented and really good creators.
Yeah, and Brian O'Sullivan as well. The
So,
yeah, the
excuse me.
author
Yeah.
of Fearscape, and Void Trip. Yeah, great bunch.
Now, what has that relationship, working with people, and even just having peers that you can bounce off ideas on in a I I caution to say the word formal in so much as you guys have named yourselves. But how has that experience helped sharpen your storytelling and allowed you to be more effective as a creator?
Honestly, I think it's for me anyway. I mean, it's a tremendous help in terms of generating story engines. It's also very good if you're. How are we with cursing, by the way?
I mean, go for it. We've got a button if
Yeah,
we need it.
it's a really good bull filter. So that's good, and just a really good filter in general. So I'll run. It's a group chat, but it's also we help each other out, and it's a laboratory as well. We kind of stress test ideas within the group. We show each other everything first. I mean, that's the great thing. I mean, I, the guys see what I'm up to. I see what Ram's up to. I see what Ryan's up to. I see what Dan's up to. And we have a pretty inflexible arrangement whereby if any of us sort of need story help, even if it's the 11th hour, and I mean even if it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and
Hmm.
one of us is struggling, we are obligated to kind of pick up the phone. We're also like the emergency services, and I think I mean, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I mean, I've certainly availed myself of that facility more than once. You've got a pitch due in the next day, and something's just not clicking, and then
Hmm.
you'll speak to one or other. And yeah, it's not just me. Others have done it as well. It's but it's really good, and we don't. I it's weird. Like when it first started, there were all kinds of there were a lot of people who were telling us to kind of formalize it, right? Like, oh, you guys should set up an LLC, and you should have a little logo that you put on all your books and everything. And Ram, who is he's the smart one. Ram always actively resisted that and just said, look, the more formal we make this, the more likely it is to kind of fall apart. Because resentments build, and things get strange, and then you introduce money into the mix, and it all gets really peculiar. We just keep it as an ongoing writer's surgery, and we help each other out when we can, no questions asked, and that's what it's remained. And it's great. I like, look, I mean, I'm not going to claim credit for anyone else's work, but I mean, I think it's fair to say that everything you read from us has had, to a greater or lesser extent, some input from all of us.
Hmm. No, it's I mean, listen, between the output of everyone from y'all that I've read, uh, and I was just staring back at my bookshelf that's right by me, and it's like, okay, that one's white noise, white noise. Okay, look, it's a heck of a lot. You guys are doing pretty okay with that.
Yeah, like it's weird, man. Like it all started in a bar at London Super Comic Con, like
Hmm.
about 5 years ago, and we were all in very different places. And in fact, the first time we all met, the first time we were all in the same room, we had one of those like adorable sitcom situations, because Ryan had a book coming out called Turncoat, and I was having a book out through
Hmm.
Boom called Turncoat. Um, and it was all kind of resolved amicably, but that was really kind of, I think that was the sort of the conversational like in was, we were both in this kind of horrible situation where we both had books with the same title.
It's good to hear. I think the amount of collaboration that I th- I think has always been there to some extent in comics. You always have a peer group. You always have the folks that you work with and bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is not a new thing, like at all. Yeah, we've just got a stupid name.
I didn't think Friends was that innovative of a thing that you guys have
Yeah,
done, but you named it,
exactly.
and I think I think that's something that has oddly been a big thing just seeing in comics over the last little bit is showing what the power of that collaborative process is, because script writing and that can be writing in general can be a very isolated process for some people. I
Yeah,
think just
exactly. And
showing
like,
like
and honestly, like we talk every day, every single day.
Mhm.
Not a day goes by that we don't talk. So yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Because otherwise you're kind of you're up there in your kind of ivory tower, and or well, in your underwear surrounded by pizza boxes, depending on depending on your preferred environment. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's just it's less. I mean, particularly during lockdown as well. I mean, it was an absolute lifeline. Um, just because weirdly, we generally, because we talk remotely most of the time.
Right.
Bizarrely, it was a very kind of normalizing. It was a very normalizing thing to do, because we were having conversations the same way we always have conversations. So it was one of the few things that didn't just sort of turn into a weird kind of upside down version of itself. When the
Well,
pandemic was at its height.
I had a similar reaction with the writers from my site, just being able to have some sort of collaborative environment that you could get some amount of interaction with other people and feel just a little bit normal, especially during the heights of everything.
Yeah.
Uh, it was definitely valuable, and it was a lot better than spending time on Twitter, where a handful of people did ask a couple of questions of you, Alex.
Oh, okay.
So we're gonna jump into just a couple of those. This first one comes to us from Rob, who asks, "What's a book or movie that you've read recently that you wish more people knew about?"
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'll do. It's not a recent one, but I always encourage people to watch it. There's a French movie called Heartbeat Detector, which everyone should watch. It's wonderful. It's the cheery story of a business executive who discovers that management jargon has a direct line to the rise of fascism.
Hmm.
It's a very, very wonderful, and it's a very, very wonderful and very kind of Parisian left bank movie. Yeah, I recommend it to absolutely everybody. And in terms of, I mean, I'll tell you what I'm reading now. Um, I'm I'm reading a book by Mary Douglas called Purity and Danger, which is all about the sort of the dialectics of purity. It's a very sort of, it's very academic, but that's my background. But it's how cultures and individuals problematize inside and outside, pure and impure, etc. And yeah, it's for a thing I'm working on, but it's very interesting. Novel wise, I just finished Grendel by John Gardner, which is one of the most beautiful novellas I think I've ever read. It's Grendel it's Beowulf from Grendel's point of view, but it's more of a kind of existential sort of cri de coeur. It's wonderful. It's beautifully written as well, absolutely beautiful.
Oh, those are folks. Read things and watch things that aren't comics. It'll help you.
Oh, do you know, like
It's
that
good.
was one of the best pieces of advice that was ever given to me. A long time ago. It was if you. I love comics. I read a ton of them, but exposing yourself to as much different media as you possibly can, being as kind of culturally omnivorous as you possibly can. I think if you particularly if you want to create, I think it is
Hmm.
so important because at its best, and I'm not, this is not, I again, I'm not claiming that my stuff is earth shattering by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it just it means that you're hopefully bringing something, you're importing rather than recycling. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I think comics, especially superhero comics, can have a tendency to be an Ouroboros can start eating its own tail, and bringing in other influences and just other experiences can very much help in terms of creation. Also, folks, it helps in terms of reading, because you get other good stories and you're like, right, books without pictures sometimes great.
Well, I mean, even on the art level, right? I mean, Sean Phillips is a good friend of mine. He lives 10 minutes up the road. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know whether it's every Wednesday or every Thursday, but certainly every week goes to a life drawing class. It's just bringing new stuff in. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Now, you're bringing new stuff in, uh, but sometimes, especially with a character like Maggott, you got to get stuff out. So Tim Mayhem asks, what problem would you like to solve by feeding it to a biomechanical slug?
Oh, I can think of a few really appalling people I'd like to feed to a biomechanical slug, but maybe this is the wrong meeting. Um, um, what problem? Um, okay, so we can feed concepts to biomechanical slugs, right?
I think we
Um,
can feed concepts to things. This is a theoretical.
it's a theoretical. Okay. Hmm. Sorry, this is something that I would have to sort of ordinarily sit with for like 20 minutes. You know what? It's something that I was talking to a friend about the other day, and I think
Mhm.
something that I would feed to a biomechanical creature is the notion that art should be therapy rather than therapeutic. Um, I would agree with that. I don't think art should be therapy. I think it should be therapeutic. I think they're very different things.
That is a very deep thought with Alex Paknadel here. Uh,
Not my thought, but I agree with it.
no. I hear where you're coming from. Dan Grote asks, if your three fellows in White Noise are Japheth, Eni, and Meanie, who is who? So Alex is not in this. Just looking at the rest of y'all, who's Japheth, who is Eni, who is Meanie?
Oh man, that's brutal. Like, okay, so because then, oh man, that's like saying which one of you is Ringo. You know what I mean? Like,
Which one?
I'm.
Which one is Ringo? Hold on. Which one of the slugs do you think doesn't belong, or is just very lucky to be here?
Yeah.
I thought we were a pro Maggot podcast over here.
No, it's no, come on, it's like, oh, I mean, Ram has amazing hair. Let's run with that. He has the best hair,
Rom does have amazing hair.
so he can be Japheth. So that's cool because he has the best hair. Um, um, yeah, I don't know. So which one is a sort of quasi parasitic endo symbiont? Like, I mean, I guess that's yeah. I mean, okay, they're both me. Then that way, I get to take the hit. Let's run with that.
That'll work. That'll work.
Yeah, there you go.
Last question for you from I'm a Face Guy. Uh, says 2022 is the year of Maggot. There is an action figure, an X-Men Unlimited arc, and even a Hero Clicks, which, as a side note, two side notes. One, it is completely dominating the Hero Clicks metagame, apparently. It turns out Maggot is a very competitively viable source for that game that I do not understand. Also,
Hmm.
thing number two, apparently my love for Maggot inspired the people who created the Maggot Hero Clicks, and that's not a joke, and that's a very weird thing that is happening.
That's
But
that's that's God's work, sir.
it's listen, listen. I've been on the Maggot train for some time now. I think I'm gonna be honest. I think it started as a joke, and then it turned into genuine affection for the character, and now I've been harassing a handful of the friends I have who are making comics. Be like, hey, if you put Maggott in this scene, I think it could really work out for you. And lo and behold, it has worked out for me. I do
Well, like,
believe
yeah,
the
dude. I mean, I think Vita put him in like Children of the Atom, and I was just like delighted. Um,
I can
yeah,
neither confirm or deny if Vita put Maggott in Children of the Atom because I begged them, or
wow.
as a
All right.
nice thing that may or may not have happened. But what? Why did it take the world 20 years to finally accept the gift of Maggott?
Well, I mean, not to be too glib about it. I think some things just take a while to digest.
Folks, our guest today has been Alex Paknadel. Alex, why don't you tell folks what you've got coming soon? Now that I know the Unlimited story has just wrapped up, as people are listening to this, you've got a couple of things on the horizon that's exciting. What do you got coming?
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so if you pick up Batman Urban Legends 17, which I think is out in July, I have a Batman Black Adam, a full length Black Adam Batman story in there, with Amakai Noel Pan, who's fantastic, and of course the great Geordie Belair. I've got a mini series coming up that I'm co-writing with Matt Rosenberg, and a wonderful artist called Pasquale Qualino, called DC versus Vampires All Out War. Again, issue 1. That's going to be a 6-issue series. Issue 1 drops in July. That's a lot of fun. That's just all out. Uh, all out vampire evisceration, just the way you like it. I've maybe got some more Marvel stuff coming up. Maybe some long form stuff, maybe some shorter form stuff, maybe I didn't make too much of a stink around the X office. We'll see what happens there. So that's nice. Some creator owned stuff that's going to be announced very shortly. I mean, I think it's safe to say, because we've been sort of teasing around the edges, I'm doing something with Casper Wingard, that I'm very, very excited about. If you check out his Instagram, he's put up some teaser art that's very sort of forest themed, I'd say, a bit arboreal. So yeah, that's all in train. And I've got some, for anyone who's read my horror graphic novel Red Fork that came out through TKO. There's some more horror work coming up on the horizon as well, which I'm very, yeah. I mean, I never think I have that much on, and then you sort of you do the list and you realize you've got a ton. But yeah, in the immediate future, Batman, which is great, because a bunch of my buddies are working on Batman, which is awesome. So I get to hang out with them for a little bit, and also DC versus Vampires. And one of the cast members in DC versus Vampires is Azrael. And although these are sort of technically, it's they're not in the same universe. I've been working very closely with Dan to make sure that my Azrael, um, sort of conceptually and on a character level, sort of rhymes with his. So there's going to be it's not like a crossover or anything, but they will be, hopefully, if I've done my job correctly, they will be recognizably the same person. That's what we're kind of aiming for.
Well, that sounds good. Excited for what's coming up, folks. If you like this podcast, go on and check out everything else we're doing over at Comics XF. We got some really exciting stuff coming in the next little bit. So we're happy about that. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. Folks, go check out all of the great stuff that's coming out. And until next time, this has been Battle of the Atom. We hope you survived the experience.
Get it!